Good morning, Eric.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Well, I always think it's good to have you on Monday because any 3-day news cycle is a lot to digest, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Let's start out with, you had a couple of great tweets on the shooting stuff. You said every U.S. mass shooting is met with a chaotic, imperfect police response. Every single one. Answer is to get rid of the shootings, not to belittle the cops. It is amazing how they turn on a dime, isn't it? This is the right-wing media, right? To always supporting cops when, for instance, there's a black person involved on the other side, right?
That's right. That's right. The Blue Lives Matter. Look, it took the NRA and Dana Loesch and the rest, it took them a week to kind of figure out they had no blueprint, they had no plan, they had no strategy. She had no strategy when she went on that town hall and got kind of eaten alive by an audience of gun surviving, the massacre survivors. So they decided over the weekend it's all the cops' fault, right? So they've latched onto this idea. They don't seem to realize it completely undercuts their main premise, which is a good guy with a gun will always stop a mass shooting or any kind of gun violence, and that's why we need guns in movie theaters. That's why we need guards at churches. And according to Trump last week, that's why we need to flood American schools with hundreds of thousands of teachers carrying guns.
Right. But, Eric, that's why your tweet was so on point. And I just read this in the New York Times. In New York, officers hit their targets 1/3 of the time. During gunfights, that accuracy can drop to as low as 13%.
Yeah.
Right.
There was a fairly famous, there aren't that many gunfights in Manhattan anymore, but within the last 5 or 8 years, there was one outside the Empire State Building, broad daylight, and cops started shooting, and there was a chase, and, it turned out, if I remember correctly, cops ended up shooting more bystanders than the people they were chasing.
Yeah.
I'm not.
And these are highly trained, right? And
I'm not pulling an NRA and saying, all these cops are, don't know what they're doing, and it's all their fault. The point is, cops aren't going to stop mass shootings, and B, a good guy with a gun doesn't stop this stuff. So the NRA has decided that if this one deputy had gone into the high school in Parkland, Florida, with a pistol and had somehow kind of stared down this madman with an AR-15, everything would have been fine.
Oh, right. And not just shot him, Eric. According to Trump, shot the hell out of him.
Shot the hell out of him.
Yeah.
And so, but notice that doesn't stop anything. Someone with an AR-15 shows up at a school and opens fire. You're not going to stop them with a armed security guard with a pistol. You might have stopped maybe 14 people would have been killed instead of 17. But even the whole thing is a complete misnomer. The whole thing is you can't stop these because there are so many guns in our culture, and people who don't have who shouldn't have guns have them. And so, the NRA and Dana Loesch and everyone else is arguing, the background check doesn't work. Well, and Nicholas Cruz never should have had a gun. Well, guess what? There's not a single law on the books in Florida that would have allowed the Broward County Sheriff Department to go to his house 3 weeks ago and take his guns. And as I've noted on Twitter many times, if they had, the NRA would have paid his legal bills to make sure he got his gun back. The Florida police and the police all around this country understand there is no legal way to take a gun away from anybody in this country because there is such a fanatical push. Not only will the NRA and the gun lobby push back, but in Florida, Rick Scott has signed every nutjob gun bill the NRA can dream of. The NRA runs the Republican Party in Florida. The Republican Party runs Florida.
Yeah.
The bills they have been dreaming up down there for the last 5 or 8 years boggles your mind, and Rick Scott has just signed them all.
Yep.
And so that's the culture down in Florida, and Florida law enforcement knows that. Yes, they clearly made mistakes. Yes, I wish some of these tips had been followed up. I mean, cops went to his house 39 times. I'm not sure what else they're supposed to do. But the key point is they know There is no way they are allowed to take guns away from anyone in the state of Florida, no matter how unstable they
By the
seem.
way, you tweeted another good point. How many mass shootings have NRA members stopped? Zero. I mean, it just this whole, misnomer of a good guy with a gun. It's by the way, we were talking about Samuel Jackson's tweet. He said, can someone that's been in a gunfight tell that mother that's never been in a gunfight the flaws of his armed teachers plan? And you did a piece about a lot of veterans talking about this. One of them saying they have this Hollywood view of what a gunfight is like. Veterans know firsthand until you've been shot at, seeing how people react in these situations. You can't wrap your mind around it. And, a lot of people pointed out, and this from a coward that has never picked up a gun for his country, talking about how, what a coward this security officer was, right?
Yeah, I mean, if Trump hadn't set out Vietnam War with a sore foot, he would have a better understanding. Look, it has been 5 days since they've, Trump has clearly been coordinated with the NRA,
right?
And they've clearly come up with a strategy. Is we're going to talk about arming teachers, and this is going to be, it's a massive distraction. It's never going to happen, thank God. But it's interesting that in 4 or 5 days, neither the NRA or the White House can find a single, and I mean a single, public policy expert, teacher representative, law enforcement group, veterans group, because he's saying, we should hire all these veterans to become teachers with guns. The White House cannot find a single person of note that will back up this plan because it is so bonkers.
Insane. On Share Blue, you quote another veteran that says, more guns makes any firefight just rife for more death, period. Kids caught in crossfire, teachers hit by stray bullets. It turns a deadly situation into a potentially more deadly situation. And that's just common sense. And I was saying, I think, Eric, it was Dana Loesch that actually said, no, we should arm the teachers with AR-15s as well. I mean, can you even imagine? I mean, the carnage, right?
The carnage. Yeah, that's the word. And if you go back to the Sandy Hook, remember after that massacre, the NRA laid low for about 10 days. Wayne LaPierre came out and gave this bonkers, fiery speech. Their radical proposal is we're going to have guards in every school in America. There are something like, I can't even remember how many hundreds of thousands of schools there are. But at that point, 5 years ago, that's how far out on the fringe that we're going to put armed guards in, literally outside every classroom in America. We're going to turn these things into prison. Obviously, it didn't happen. But 5 years later, so they've made that leap. So they're not NRA isn't talking about guards anymore. It's interesting, right? The NRA is not talking about adding more security guards at school. They have made this crazy radical leap to turning teachers. New teachers in the state of Alabama make $42,000, right? So now they're going to become police cops too. Now they're going to get, quote, a little bonus, as Trump puts it. He says we can do this inexpensively by basically turning. So it's not going to happen, thankfully. But it is interesting to note the NRA continues to make these radical. We run out of adjectives, but every 4 or 5 years they unfortunately. They move the public debate into the complete fringes, which is what arming teachers is.
Yep. By the way, just quickly before you go, I love this piece on what's his name, the Governor Eric Greitens. Is that how you say it? The Missouri Republican.
Yeah.
Oh my God! You said he was arrested, charged with a felony count in connection with an unfolding blackmail scandal. The Republican Party in Missouri needed a villain to blame. On Friday, they blamed George Soros. So for those of you that don't remember, I think he tied a woman to his exercise machine blindfolded and took pictures of her.
Yes. And the idea was that he would use that as a threat.
Blackmail.
I don't know, revenge porn, whatever you want to call
it.
If she ever went public. And so this is a guy who ran on a very Trumpian Republican platform. Personal responsibility, clearly
family
had
values.
His eye on,
yeah.
Clearly had his eye on a higher office outside of Missouri. Claire McCaskill, I mean, she has just been blessed. I mean, this is just the most recent of kind of rather astounding blunders coming out of Republican Party in Missouri and their candidates, and
Yeah.
she was supposed to be easy pickings. I mean, that is, for the Republican parties. I mean, she was going to be knocked off hands down. I don't think Claire McCaskill is going to go anywhere after November. But yeah, so they needed this villain. We had the Republican governor indicted, and so the next day they blamed this liberal conspiracy and blamed billionaire philanthropist George Soros.
Of course.
I mean, this is just like out of the Fox News playbook circa 2012. I mean, it's such a dated and pathetic attempt. I don't think
Eric,
he's
don't
gonna
make
survive
it.
as governor.
Don't pretend like George Soros hasn't forced a lot of us to tie naked people to our exercise equipment and take blackmail pictures.
How do you think I got back here?
Wow. Exactly.
But in the larger sense, I mean, we see the Republican Party imploding in Pennsylvania, where they've got this special election. They've had representatives have to quit because of scandal in Missouri, and I mean, there's something rotten within the Republican Party. And we haven't even talked about the congressman from my old hometown of Utica, New York, up in upstate New York, who said last week, we find out a lot of these mass shooters turn out to be Democrats. Trump has unleashed, obviously, I'm not saying anything new. I mean,
right.
We saw it all at CPAC. He has unleashed something disgusting and vile throughout this Republican Party, whether it's Missouri, Pennsylvania, upstate New York. It's not just the South.
So are we just ignoring the fact that this kid is pictured in Make America Great Again hats, shooting stuff, and
right. Exactly.
was on a what do you call it, racist, sexist, homophobic, what do you call it, white supremacist site on Instagram and all that stuff? Okay. Yeah. I mean, it really is incredible. And by the way, there's another reason to love you. I did not know you were from Utica. I'm from Lockport, up the transit from Cheektowaga, Tonawanda, and Lackawanna.
and the sad part is, upstate New York used to have, in the scheme of things, some really smart, passionate, moderate Republicans, and one of them for 2 decades was named Sherry Boehlert. So I have an affinity for that district, and to watch Congressman Tenney last week just kind of unfurl that free flag and talk about how all mass shooters are Democrats. I think the Republican Party is going to have major problems in the midterm election in New York, Pennsylvania. And
that gives me a sad.
It
sad.
It does give us hope. It does give us hope.
Eric, great stuff. Talk to you next week.
Okay, bye.
All right, there he goes, Eric Boehlert.